All right, so if you haven't realized this already, get ready for a little bit of a long flipped classroom here. Rome is very difficult to pare down, especially for history teachers because we tend to love Rome. So hopefully you do too. Um, so the Roman Republic was very successful. It allowed for, at that time, a lot of representation within the Senate, but as Rome expanded, things got a little bit more dicey, and Rome expanded for quite a bit of time. From these rather humble origins, the Romans began to expand in the fourth and especially the second century BCE with a series of wars. While the Romans usually expanded militarily, they also treated people they conquered with unusually generous and tolerant fashions, which really inspired loyalty. So how did they expand? They expanded with legions. So legions were these groups of Roman soldiers, and they were kind of reminiscent of the hoplites, as you can see here with this demonstration, even today, with these big shields and the swords that they carried, and also the spears. But they were highly organized, and to those legions, they also added cavalries. If you've ever watched Gladiator, you can see this in the first scene of the movie where they're fighting the Germanic tribes. They pulled soldiers from local populations and inspired loyalty with the possibility of citizenship. That was a strategy they used as well with the regular population, the possibility of citizenship and privileges that went along with that, including different taxation, including different rights like the right to a fair trial. These things came along with the possibility of citizenship. But the Roman legions were pretty tough. They had that reputation, so you also did not want to mess with them. In addition, you got to keep your own religion. You didn't have to convert to a certain religion when usually when the Romans came to town. So how did they expand west? Well, they conquered basically the Phoenicians, who were also known as the Carthaginians, and I'll show you where the city of Carthage is. It was very strategic. The Carthaginians' base was in northern Africa, and the Romans call these the Punic Wars because that name derives from the Phoenicians. That's what they called the Phoenicians. This was a huge trading empire that the Romans took control of that had a lot of really sweet resources that they wanted, and it was really a turning point in history. If Hannibal had aided the Carthaginians in succeeding and taking over Rome, which they almost did, they came this close. Rome history would look very different. In the east, they had successful wars against the Antigonid, Seleucid, and Ptolemaic empires, and so they fell without a lot of war in some cases. So the Carthaginian Empire, here it is. Um, they had resources like silver, grain, salt. They were controlling trade routes here across the Trans-Saharan trade routes, and also the Mediterranean trade routes because they were Phoenicians, the excellent sailors. So Rome really got a lot by conquering those areas. And here is the city of Carthage, strategically placed right on the Mediterranean. Here's Rome, BTW. Okay, so as Rome moved from a republic to an empire, how did that happen? Well, with all of this increasing wealth, there came, it wasn't equally distributed, duh, amongst the people. So with this conquest, there was immense wealth brought to Rome, and it increased the unequal distribution of wealth. So you had some people, like the latifundia landowners. Latifundia is the name for the Roman plantations, who used a lot of slave labor. They really dominated small landowners because their products were a lot cheaper. They could devote an entire plantation, as you see here, using their slave labor to one or two or three key crops and or key products, and they could therefore sell those products for a lot cheaper. These small landowners who became impoverished, where did they move? They moved to cities where they became masses of unemployed people. And that is not good for stability, because then you get a lot of riots, especially with these people living in cities, because the conditions were horrible and they would often have fires in their housing. Just and their houses would collapse. You know, they were not well constructed. So it's pretty crappy position to be in. People responded to that. They tried to change things. The Gracchi tried to bring about land reform and use state subsidies to help these poor, the Gracchi brothers here. They were kind of like Wang Mang in the Han Dynasty, where they attempted to redistribute land. And of course, just like Wang Mang, they were assassinated because the richer classes did not enjoy having their land taken away. After that, there were a series of really bloody wars with private armies brought about by generals. One of the generals, by the way, had his own firefighting business that he would use in those slums of Rome, and he would actually start fires so that people would have to pay him to go put them out. This was not so good. Not so good, right? So these guys were not super nice people. Um, so there was a lot of destabilization. This made making money impossible because you never knew when you're going to have another war. The Romans were really sick of this, and they were like, look, we will do anything if we don't have to deal with this anymore. So they created this thing called the Triumvirate with 3 generals in charge. And out of that, there, guess what, is a civil war, and Julius Caesar emerges victorious. So how does he get Rome out of this horrible time? Well, we're going to learn about that and the dawning of empire in the next PowerPoint, or the next section of this presentation.